Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be diving into episodes 680 through 682, which will cover manga chapters 745 through 748. And Doflamingo is back, as we all expected, and he is out to make sure no one makes it off of Dressrosa alive. Alright, so synopsis. Doflamingo is not dead thanks to the help of his clone, made of strings. However, Doflamingo is now angry beyond measure and is determined to make sure that no one makes it out of Dressrosa alive by trapping everyone in it with his Birdcage ability and instituting a bounty hunting game, with the targets being the Straw Hats, the Riku royal family, as well as members of the Revolutionary Army. Alright, so differences. There are a decent number of differences, as you'll see. Dressrosa is full of fillers. It's just becoming absurd. But yeah, at the beginning of episode 680, the anime shows Diamante and Trouble actually fighting and dispatching of the freed people who were trying to attack the factory, while the manga implies this happens off-screen as it immediately cuts to Diamante and Trouble already standing above the knocked out people, but we don't actually get to see them fight and get knocked out. Another one is the anime adds a scene where Fujitora, it shows him using his incredible senses and haki to notice and catch Doflamingo's parasite string to prevent himself from being controlled, which is not shown in the manga. There's an added scene of Frankie fighting against the former toys and citizens and then running away. In the manga, you only get to that one panel of Dellinger, Mach Weiss, and Senior Pink realizing that Frankie is missing, but you don't actually see Frankie running away and then confronting some of these bounty hunting people. There's an additional scene in episode 682, just before Luffy jumps off the cliffside with Zoro and Law, where Viola explains that she saw where Law's handcuff, the keys to the handcuffs fell. And this moment was not in the manga, and it actually just cuts straight to Luffy getting ready to jump with Zoro and Law under each arm, bypassing all of that. Another added scene was while Koala's investigating the ships for the weapons trade, there's a scene where the crew of that ship returns to dispose of the evidence, but Koala intervenes and dispatches them quickly. In the manga, all we get is that one panel of her taking pictures with her Dendemushi camera, and then and kind of sneaking around, but we don't actually see anything with the crew. Lastly, in the manga, there's more to the scene where Doflamingo is addressing his crew, but because the anime seems to want to save a specific aspect of that scene for the next episode, they cut this scene in half and move the other half of the conversation to the next episode while bringing up the conversation with Senor Pink, Mach Weiss, and Dellinger kind of talking about Frankie. That scene is moved up, as well as all the confrontation with Fujitora and everything that kind of ends this episode. That is also moved ahead as well. So those are all the major sort of changes that were made in the anime compared to the manga. So let's get into the episodes themselves. So as we come back from that crazy twist that Doflamingo is still alive after being decapitated, we quickly learn what is happening as Kyros goes in for another finishing blow when another Doflamingo instantly appears behind him about ready to decapitate Kyros. But actually, to be clear, based on the aftermath of the entire building being sliced in half, it almost feels like Doflamingo was ready to obliterate everything, but Luffy with his observation haki is able to react fast enough to save Kyros. And I will say, this moment has a lot more kinetic energy in the manga. Like, the way it's depicted in the anime, I feel doesn't quite capture just how fast Doflamingo and Luffy were here. There's one panel where it's just a shot of Kyros' head, and all you can see is just the tip of Doflamingo's foot, just emphasizing that he and us and the camera are really slow to react, as we only get to see this little tidbit of Doflamingo's shoe. And Oda drew it this way to kind of give us the sense that there wasn't enough to even capture everything in the frame. And I think the problem is that they animated so few frames that it's so incredibly choppy that there's no sense of momentum or speed, I feel like, in the anime. So this is one of those moments where, yeah, it seems like time and budget really kind of hampered this scene, because they animate so few frames that you don't get that sense of speed and like movement and kinetic energy. It's just, it looks really bad in the anime. It's then revealed that Doflamingo has in fact created a clone of himself out of string, which is pretty cool and something I could totally see him doing, but how does it have color and is able to talk? Like, I understand that the real Doflamingo is talking, but wouldn't you notice that the voice is coming from some other part of the room? I mean, it's just really weird. And also, like, why does the string have different colors? There's there's no real way that Doflamingo has been able to like color it, and it's not like sort of with the situation with Mr. Three and Miss Golden Week, where you know Mr. Three's candle wax was just colorless white, where the only reason why it's got color is because Miss Golden Week was painting it for him. But there's none of that going on here, so it's just like, how does this clone actually work? But in any case, this is it. Our first Luffy versus Doflamingo fight, as it has begun to sort of ramp up, as we say. And Luffy immediately jumps in with Jet Gatling, which is ineffective against Doflamingo's armament haki, and he gets completely caught off guard by a string clone and gets slashed in the back. That sends him flying into Doflamingo's fist, and this looks like it hurt. It becomes immediately clear that Doflamingo is not going to go down easy, and might very well be one of the toughest opponents that Luffy has faced yet, which is honestly a very welcome development considering the last two arcs since the time skip have been filled with villains that have effectively not even really given Luffy a challenge in Hody and Caesar. And I am certainly ready to see Luffy in a real fight in the post-time skip era, just to see how powerful he's actually gotten. That being said, it was smart of Oda, like I've said in the past, to hold off on pitting Luffy against a real challenge so that we can see just how far Luffy and his crew have come. Otherwise, it would have seemed like, what was the training good for if we're already seeing him struggle? It also helps the pacing and progression and power scaling of the series, especially considering how long it already is and how much longer it still has to go. Doflamingo then, with the overwhelming power of Pika, boots everyone out of the palace and then proceeds to produce what he ominously calls the Birdcage, that essentially envelops the entire city, trapping everyone inside with every intention of killing everyone inside it before the truth gets out. And I think what really sells us on the initial threat of the Birdcage is actually Law's reaction to it. Like, Law is usually this unflappable and cool, calm guy, but for the first time, he's actually showing true fear at what it means to be trapped inside Doflamingo's Birdcage, implying that he's witnessed this in the past, having worked under him, and he must have seen this being used on another set of people, or perhaps maybe it was even used on him. And so, yeah, this is, I think, what really sells us on the threat of the Birdcage. Not only that, but the display of mastery over their Devil Fruit is frankly terrifying here, as Doflamingo has the ability to basically deploy like a bunch of like mass different techniques on a large scale, which is insane. He has just deployed a citywide Birdcage while also deploying his Parasite to control God knows how many people at once to attack each other, as well as having his string clone somewhat still intact as well. Controlling all of those at the same time on the scale that he does is simply incredible and just shows you just how much mastery that he has over his Devil Fruit, which is something I think like we kind of saw with Crocodile for sure. And there are other characters that have shown quite a lot of use with their Devil Fruit, but most of it I feel like comes from just the sheer power that the fruit has. But this is the first time I feel like we've seen someone like really manipulate their fruit in pretty insane ways, especially how, mentally speaking, how much concentration it probably takes to control all these things at once. Because I can't imagine Parasite being a very easy ability to use, especially on that level. Like, he's controlling like several dozen people all at once to attack each other. And some of these people he was even trying to control Fujitora as well. I mean, controlling someone of that caliber must not be that easy. Like, that is going to be a difficult task, but he was still trying for it, which is pretty insane when you think about it. But not only that, exterior to him, he's got Pika, who can move the earth itself to move the palace out of reach from any threats. And Doflamingo has just amassed quite the powerful arsenal of powers and crew, and it's no wonder why he's become one of the most feared pirates in the world, and he's amassed so much power and influence. But it's also kind of scary to think that there are people who are even above him in terms of strength, influence, and intimidation. Like, what is Kaido like if someone like Doflamingo fears him? And I think the question on my mind going forward was how Fujitora was going to proceed. Obviously, seeing this level of cruelty and violence probably does not sit well with him. But is he going to flip and help take down Doflamingo? Or would he still pursue the Straw Hats and the Alliance first? Of course, by this point, I was really pulling for Fujitora to turn, but I also had a hard time seeing it become that easy to have a current Marine Admiral fight alongside them, but obviously one can wish, and we will get sort of the answer to this at the end of this set of episodes. For everyone else, witnessing all the horrors of what's happening all around them, the citizens of Dressrosa finally put it together what actually happened that fateful night that Doflamingo was behind Riku and his soldiers massacring all those people 10 years ago. Then in a complete tonal whiplash, we get a scene that's completely comedic with Bartolomeo getting confirmation from Robin that Sogeking is in fact Usopp, and he's lying there right in front of him, going absolutely crazy at meeting the legendary man that shot the world government flag and declared war on said world government alongside Luffy. Sabo and Hack's reaction to this are very appropriate and funny. Sabo is annoyed at how loud and ridiculous he's being, while Hack is thinking to himself, I broke my arm against this guy? It's kind of funny to see how ridiculous Bartolomeo has become. But I, of course, love it. And I love every scene that he's in. With the Birdcage in place, this now sets the stage for another one of Doflamingo's cruel games that he so loves, which thematically matches with his sort of playing card structure to his crew. It's pretty chilling seeing Doflamingo just laugh maniacally while people are in horror as they're forced to hurt and kill each other. He then sets the rules of the game to turn everyone against each other as he puts bounties on 12 people, ranking them by value in terms of stars, with 1 star being 100 million berries, which is an insane amount of money. Beginning with Rebecca, Robin, Kinemon, Viola, and Frankie set as 1-star bounties, continuing with Kyros and Zoro set to 2-star bounties, which I feel is way too low for both of them. Then we get to the 3 stars with Sabo, Luffy, Law, and Riku the third. And for a minute, that seems like that's all the bounties, but if you're counting, that's only 11, and we all already know who's left, as Doflamingo announces the person that's pissed him off the most, that person being God Usopp. Not only that, he just straight up skips 4 stars and sets his bounty at 5 stars. When I first read this, I remember I just about howled in laughter. The fact that Usopp got the highest bounty, combined with the face that he and everyone else makes at the shocking announcement. But not only that, Doflamingo already knows to refer to him as God. This is also hilarious. Also, Doflamingo must have an amazing media production guy to have all these graphics ready with what I have to assume is a bounty system and value that he created off the cuff just in that moment, which is crazy. I mean, that's obviously anime logic. There's no way that anyone could prepare those graphics that quickly, but yeah, it's pretty funny to think about when you like kind of sit back and think about the logistics of that scene. But yeah, this causes a few of the lesser people to turn on their savior for a quick buck. But I think seeing the citizens of Dressrosa's response to this game's terms is more interesting because it's clear now, knowing that the truth that Riku wasn't an evil king that turned on them, but in their desperation, they decide that they won't go as far as to kill, but they will play Doflamingo's game. And at the end, very least they'll hand him over, which is such a cop-out considering that they have to know that in their heart of hearts that if Doflamingo gets their hands on them, he will kill them. And the people are essentially rationalizing that as long as they don't deal the fatal blow, that their hands can stay clean. However, that's not how it works. Although you can't be too hard on these people as they're all literally about to die and this is their only choice. However, the guys that go after the bounties for the sake of the profits, these people are the literal scum, especially the ones that turn on Usopp. Luckily, Usopp has a small army of incredibly strong people surrounding him that help to drag him away and protect him, and having Bartolomeo on their side is incredibly helpful with his defensive capabilities. It's at this point Robin calls Zoro and the others, and they finally get to regroup a little bit. And this is where we get a nice moment where Luffy confirms for Rebecca that the toy soldier was in fact her father. And Luffy promises her that no matter what, that he will protect Kyros, beat Doflamingo, and reunite them. And I always get chills when Luffy relies on his crew and him telling her not to leave their side. And in this case, he's referring to Robin and Usopp. And that was such a cool touch, like how Luffy just basically said that you'll be safe as long as you stay near one of my crew members. And he's right. Like, you know, you can always rely on the Straw Hats to protect you. And so, I just really love this moment. And I love that we get to see more and more of that post-time skip. Although more so, you know, obviously this, more so with Robin than Usopp in his current state. But, you know, especially since their collective goal in wanting to get stronger in the 2-year time skip was to be able to support Luffy, I love that that's actually coming to fruition more and more. Coming back to Law, though, he's kind of all over the place when it comes to this conflict. He reminds Luffy of their objective and what's at stake, and that was to destroy the Smile Factory and let Kaido and Doflamingo go at it with each other as a result of the fallout. But if Luffy instead takes down Doflamingo first, then Kaido will come after them instead. But as Sanji rightfully pointed out earlier in the arc, that Law seems irrationally fixated on Doflamingo as well. And so, yeah, it seems like the Law also wants to go after Doflamingo, but he's still trying to like kind of fight himself in his own mind, whether he should or shouldn't do that because of the sort of the logistics of that and the irrational, you know, sort of approach of doing that for his own sake rather than the more practical sort of route of letting Kaido and Doflamingo go at it themselves. Luffy, of course, showing who he is, seeing all this, can't help but want to help the people of Dressrosa. And at this point, I always felt like perhaps Law was still iffy as to whether they could even beat Doflamingo and his crew. And sort of always being as cautious and calculating as he is, he probably still favored not wanting to go head to head with Doflamingo. And he wanted to take the safer bet of having Kaido beat him. But you do get the sense that he's kind of conflicted at this point in whether he should actually go for that. Because, yeah, he does seem to have a very personal stake, obviously, having been with Doflamingo and part of his crew. And there's probably more to that story, which we'll get to at some point. Luffy, the simple man that he is, knows what he needs to do and will take the simplest route to get there as he grabs Zoro and Law under each arm and just jumps back towards the palace without even really thinking about Law's cuffs or anything. And we get a brief scene of Fujitora and the Marines and what they're doing, and Fujitora making sure to restrain everyone for now in order to reduce any unnecessary killing from the outlaws or the citizens as they're being controlled by the parasite power. Interestingly though, when Vice Admiral Bastille asks him whether their next steps should be to take down Doflamingo, instead, he still sticks to ordering his men to go after Luffy and Law. It was kind of weird to me how if he would just go after Doflamingo, this game would end, but instead he still says to go after Luffy and Law. And this seems really odd for someone as perceptive and philosophically good as Issho is. But for the first time, we get a hint of what Issho is thinking as Vice Admiral Maynard returns and questions him about this very thing. And while his response is very cryptic at this point, you start to understand what he's getting at. He's talking about how these people aren't sad, that they're actually angry. And when Maynard points out that Doflamingo will most certainly lose his status as a Shichibukai, and thus they can go after him. But then Issho responds with, that is what the Marines have done over and over. And they've done the same thing for years. And more specifically, I believe he's referencing the Arabasta incident and what happened there. How they allowed the Shichibukai to do as they please as long as it serves the world government when they need. But in the process, countless people, innocent people, are hurt along the way because of this broken system. And whenever those Shichibukai get too far out of line, then the Marines just come in and clean up that mess. And it's a mess that they themselves created, but then are lauded as heroes for taking down these evil pirates, quote unquote. And this is especially relevant to Arabasta, as we know that it was Luffy and the Straw Hats that actually cleaned up their mess that Crocodile Shichibukai had caused for them. But in order to keep up their good appearance, they covered up what actually happened and gave the credit to Smoker and Tashigi, which pissed Smoker off to no end, as you'll recall, because he, like Issho, knew what this meant. It basically allowed the world government to essentially have their cake and eat it too, and this is what Fujitora meant when he angrily shouts, "Does the world government pretend to be God or something?" He's essentially saying they are playing with people's lives, playing God, doing whatever they like, controlling the events and narratives to suit only themselves, and Fujitora sees right through what's been going on for years. So it seems like this time he's committed to letting things play out and not have a Marine intervene to quote-unquote save the day so that they can come out looking good again. For now, it almost seems like he's content not really choosing a side. He orders his men to go after the pirates, but he himself still won't move. Almost like he wants what happened in Arabasta to happen again, but this time, unlike Smoker, as an admiral, he probably has a lot more power to prevent the story from being covered up, and thus can use it as ammunition to propose putting an end to the Shichibukai system entirely, as he mentioned earlier. Fujitora is an incredibly interesting character, and I love him because of that. He's like a very unique admiral that we've never really seen, at least with the other three. Like, he has his own sort of agenda and has a lot more agency and is kind of like separate from the world government. Like, for all the great things about Aokiji, being a good, well, seemingly good guy, he still towed the company line. Like, he still followed orders, did what he needed to do and what he was told to do until the very end, when he decided that when he didn't get the fleet admiral position, he decided to leave instead of trying to change things. But Fujitora or Issho, he seems to be more like, I don't give an F about what your orders are. I am going to change the system from the inside. And I really, really like that about him. Also, speaking of interesting, Doflamingo shows a very interesting and unexpected side to him, and that's his patience and understanding with his crew. Despite Treble and Diamante royally screwing up by letting Sugar get knocked out and losing the Meta fruit, respectively, he's incredibly calm and forgives them almost instantly, instead of what you usually see with villains of his caliber who would turn on his crew for much less, or at least punish them harshly. This is especially in stark contrast when you cast your mind back to, again, the Arabasta arc with Crocodile, how he treated his subordinates. When Mr. 3 or Gaudino messed up, he basically murdered or tried to murder him, and if it weren't for Gaudino's sort of quick thinking, he would have died, as well as Robin, like his right-hand woman. When she became useless to him, he basically stabbed her, leaving her for dead, and if it wasn't for Luffy, she would have died too. And yeah, Doflamingo at the very least treasures sort of the family aspect of his crew and his Don Quixote family. And this becomes abundantly clear when we get to see the scene with Pika. But unfortunately, because the anime wants to save the other reveal for the next episode, that portion of it gets cut out of this episode and pushed to the next one. So we won't get to talk about it on this podcast episode, but we'll definitely explore it on the next one. But instead, we catch up with Luffy, Zoro, and Law as they happen to fall right in front of a trio of Don Quixote family executives, Senor Pink, Dellinger, and Mach Weiss. And this scene is fun and cool all at the same time, because it's a rare moment that we get to see Luffy and Zoro kind of running around together these days, as Oda often has to split them up much of the time so as to not make things too easy for them, thereby lowering the tension of any given scene. Because when you have Luffy and Zoro together, they're almost unstoppable, I feel like. And I just love seeing how in sync they are, with Luffy narrowly avoiding Mach Weiss's 10-ton Weiss attack, and then when Dellinger is getting ready to attack Luffy when he's off balance from avoiding Mach Weiss's attack, Zoro just kind of swoops in and just slightly nudges Dellinger and redirects the kick into Mach Weiss, which is pretty hilarious. But I also love just how kind of like they're almost like college friends. It just feels really cool seeing that dynamic throughout this arc. And Law being there is also fun too, because not only does he serve to give us more information about each member, his dynamic with Luffy is always hilarious, because Luffy is full on committed to Law becoming a nakama, obviously he's not, but like Luffy is just completely enamored with Law, and Law just is not having it. Even though I think he secretly is starting to warm up to Luffy. Like you can see how Law is starting to like just recognize how like I don't know how good Luffy is as a person, and I think it's hard not to fall in love with Luffy if you spend that much time around him, just because of how sincere and genuine he is. Like that moment earlier when Luffy basically announces that he is going to protect Kyros, and also that he's not going to just run away and just complete their mission and peace out. Like he wants to save the people of Dressrosa. And I think Law deep down is a good person, and he's starting to see just what kind of person Luffy is. And he won't admit it himself, but you can definitely see that. And I love that. And I love those little moments that start to build up over time, which again, as I've always said, is one of the strengths of One Piece, is because of how long it is. You get to see those little moments add up over and over and over. And especially why One Piece is also really good on repeat viewings or repeat rereads. You pick up on more and more of those, and you get to see where it ends up. And so moments that you thought were pointless or just really small and insignificant turn out to be really big, or at least not insignificant. And so that's what makes One Piece so fun. But anyways, the end of the episode and this set of episodes, however, leaves us on another major cliffhanger, as Fujitora has finally decided to make his move on Luffy, Law, and Zoro, landing in front of them. And it'll be interesting to see what Fujitora actually does here, whether he wants to confront them, whether he kind of goes easy on them, what happens. Like, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this confrontation. But yeah, that'll be it for this set of episodes. If you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment. If you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram at SunnyGo Podcast for updates when I post new episodes. I know I've fallen behind yet again. I will try and get more on top of that. I am just terrible when it comes to my social media accounts. But yeah, check those out for any updates. Also, again, just listening to the podcast is enough support for me. But if you feel like extra supporting me, you can check out my Buy Me a Coffee profile. And as always, I wanted to thank you for taking the time out to listen to my podcast. No spoiler section today, but stay safe out there, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye.